Welcome to the Binge Breakers podcast. I'm Jacqueline. I am here to teach you how I overcame bulimia and my binge eating disorder, and how you can too. Through simple steps of mind management, repairing your relationship with yourself, understanding your habits, and intuitive eating. Hi all, I am here with Kevin Burciaga. So Kevin, how about you just introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Kevin Burciaga. You can find me on YouTube at Kevin Burciaga and on Instagram at The Rational Eater. I help Gen Zers and millennials overcome binge eating and other eating disorders and help them eat right for good.
Awesome. Yeah, I like the for good too. It's just like permanent. Yeah. But I first, I don't exactly know. I was trying to think through this beforehand. I don't remember how I found you. I found you on Instagram for sure. That's really all I know. But I think you just popped up on a binge eating hashtag or something. And I saw one of your many videos that you put on there. And I was like, who is this person? But I liked what you said, because I thought you had really practical, rational, as your Instagram handle would suggest, logical kind of tips, and you're very straightforward. And I think we get along a lot on binge eating tips. And binge eating is different than bulimia in a lot of aspects, but they coincide a lot. So could you just, thank you for being on here, first of all. Appreciate it. But also, could you just share with us your story a little bit? You know, what was your background with binge eating like? I think that's always helpful for listeners to hear.
Yeah, it was never my intention. That was never my goal. But it started when I was in college. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure, but I got really into fitness, health, nutrition, and started reading a lot about that. Started going to the gym for the first time ever. Got a job at Whole Foods. So it started well.
No. Whole Foods.
I know. Whole Foods? What's wrong with Whole Foods? Anyway, so I was just really into it, and I think I had the right intentions. But then things started to go wrong really soon. I remember that year, that third year of college, I went to it, had more doctor's appointments that year than the rest of my life combined.
Oh, wow.
I was just bumping between the hematologist and the endocrinologist, and never really got good answers. And I remember I had bleeding in I think it was my right eye. I forget, didn't take a photo. And I think the final answer was there was a lesion on my pituitary gland. And this coincided with these drastic changes that I'd made my diet. I was anemic. I had no energy, no muscle mass, couldn't put on muscle mass. People around me were concerned. So it was really just orthorexic. And I don't think I knew that word back then. I think at the time I thought I was doing the right thing, but now it was just like full blown orthorexic, all these rules, very regimented, very strict, very judgmental. And then over time, well, actually, when I was working at Whole Foods, I worked the late shift, so I'd be there until 11 midnight. And I remember I would just gorge on all of the fruit that they were going to put in the compost bin.
Wow.
It was just like giant amounts. But of course, this only happened, I was only working part-time. So this was only 1 or 2 episodes a week. I felt terrible about it. But then I went home after my last shift and thought, okay, whatever, won't happen again. And then about year and a half later, I remember having my first episode of chewing and spitting. And so that's kind of binge eating, kind of bulimic. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a mix of both. Very similar behavior, same psychology. And I started doing that a lot. I was like, just chew, spit. And so that went on for a year and a half. I guess you could call that my first ED. It's not really classified as an ED. Nobody really talks about that.
Yeah, it's disordered eating, right? It's so like the eating disorder covers so much, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean, you have eating disorder versus disordered eating. It's okay, where's the line there? Right. There is no line. But yes. So I started doing that, and then I remember I stopped that, and I purged a few times. I was never a serious bulimic. I mean, some bulimics, they're having like 2-3 episodes a day, where it's just like this. I never went that far, but I did have episodes of purging. Or if I couldn't purge, I would just go 3 or 4 days without eating, or I'd just go to the gym for several hours. I mean, there had to be some form of compensation.
Right.
So there had to be some way to get it out, or at least feel better about it. And then that turned into binge and restrict, and then just binge eating, and then binge restrict. And then there were a couple periods of remission where I thought, surely I'm recovered this time. And then it came back even worse than it was before. And so this went on years. And so from the time that initial episode in the back room of a Whole Foods to my last one, it's probably 11 years.
Well, so it's been a little while for sure.
That's a good chunk of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think time is like everything, right? Because it's like someone asking like, "Oh, how long you been working out for?" And it's like working out correctly or what do you mean? But yeah, it's a long time and distance between that. So yeah, I don't think I've definitely done the chew and spit thing before, but it was never like my only form of binging and purging and stuff like that. But so how did you take your first steps towards recovery then? Like what there's all this thing, that gives us a pretty picture of that, but how did you
Yeah.
even get through that?
I just, it wasn't like this epiphany. It's not like I woke up one day and said, okay, I'm done with this.
Dang it.
I wish, I know, words so easy. But it wasn't. It was, I remember thinking to myself, how much longer do I want to do this? Like, I'm in my early 30s now. There's really no excuse for it. Not that there ever was. Uh, it's like, what do I really want? That was a question I asked myself. How long am I going to live in this cycle? It's like the prodigal son who lives it up and then one day wakes up and he's in this pigsty, with poop everywhere and flies, and he's thinking, okay, what do I really want here? And then he
Right.
comes to his senses and goes back to his fire. Yeah, the whole story. That was the big turning point for me. But like I said, it wasn't one day. There was this long process of negotiations with myself. What do I want?
Negotiating
Do I
with
want to
yourself
stop
is
this?
hard.
It really is. It really is,
Yeah.
because there's no agenda. There's a lot of baggage. You're not sure which direction you want to go, or sometimes you start moving in that direction and then you turn back and you go in the other direction. So that was a long process. But where did it start? It started by asking those questions. How much longer do I want to live like this? And what is it that I really want?
Yeah, I think asking yourself what is it that you really want, because a lot of people are like, I know I don't want to live this way, or I know that this isn't good at the very least. They're like, maybe there's something better, but they never ask themselves, okay, well, if you don't want this, what do you want? Like, if you don't want this, what are we going to do instead? And I think
Yeah.
it's that lack of knowing or that lack of even creatively thinking about it that can keep people stuck in those cycles, so that your brain doesn't think about the alternative options. It's like, this is what we know, this is what's going to happen, but you giving an answer is really helpful.
Yeah, and I hear this on strategy calls too, and people who are considering working with me. I think the problem a lot of times is they just don't know what they want.
Yeah, because they don't ask themselves that question ever, or it feels
Yeah.
selfish, or whatever reason they have for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's this uh, like the stages of change. I forget. I'd have to find it somewhere. One of those is the contemplation phase. Well, that can be a really long phase for a lot of people. It
Yes.
certainly was for me. You're figuring out, okay, this is what I want. I'm going to go in this direction. I'm never going to turn back. That's really hard to do.
hmm I try to, the better I get at being in recovery, the better I get at like business goals, whatever. I try not to spend too much time in the contemplation stage, or I call it kind of indecision, like
Yeah.
dwelling in that, just because I'd rather make a decision than spend too much time on it, depending on the situation. Of course, some things you do need to think about, but with the recovery, there did come a point similar to you where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not for me. We're gonna keep on moving forward. We're not gonna contemplate this anymore. We're gonna actively try to do this no matter how many times you fail. That kind of mindset, I think, made the change. So I know that like there's no like you could talk for hours about how you recovered and that's what you do for a business too. But what are some of the first steps you took towards recovery after that moment? Like, how'd you pick yourself up out of it?
Just assessing the decisions that I was making on an everyday basis.
Okay.
Is this what I want to do? Is this what future Kevin would do? I always had this vision of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to behave and the habits that I wanted. And I thought, okay, if I were that version of myself and I had everything I wanted, would I do this?
Mm.
And it was just like assessing one decision at a time, not obsessively, but just thinking, is this ultimately what I want to do? Is this what the Kevin 5.0 would do? Would Kevin 5.0 go to a vending machine? Would he be stuck in the drive-through at a fast food joint? Would he be having his fifth Sonic Blast of
Hmm.
the week? Would he be snacking at 10 o'clock at night? The answer is no. Then I stopped. But it wasn't one time. It was a practice over a
Yeah.
long period of time. But it takes self-awareness and it also takes vision. So where am I now versus where I want to be?
Hmm. I technically, or not technically, I try to, when people are first recovering in my program, I have them write out kind of what they would be like without bulimia, or how they would think without that, because like you're saying, it's so important to think, what would Kevin of the future do? I think that all the time about my goals. Like, guys, I was just telling Kevin before this that I'm scared to do Instagram lives, and it's like I have to think about what would the Jacqueline that wasn't scared about Instagram lives do, right? You just have to push yourself to do that and keep visualizing it, like the self-awareness, but then visualization is important too, and if you don't have that image, then it's kind of hard to make those decisions.
And also knowing what your motivation is.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
reason why
you know,
you're even doing it in the first place.
yeah, is it worth the discomfort?
Hmm.
Is it like Instagram Live? Well, what's your mission with Instagram Live? I'm assuming to reach more of the right people,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And if that's what you really want, then you'll hit that red button and just go live.
Right. That's good. I just got coached basically. Right. I need to think about it. It's the
Yeah.
same concept. Yeah. That's another
Hit
interesting
the
thing.
button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the things you learn in recovery, I don't know, I'm sure you find this, but the things you learn in recovery are also things that can be easily applied to so many things in life too. It's like motivations for recovering, apply that to different things like doing Instagram live. Um, so you visualize things like that. When you initially were trying to, no, actually, let me ask a different question. Kind of curious. We can talk about how you kind of sat through that discomfort and things like that, because I'm sure there came a time when you wanted to binge eat and you didn't binge eat. But what was binge eating for you, or what was bulimia for you? Like, why do you think you wanted to hold on to it for so long?
It was a lot of things. It was the familiar enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It was that constant. It was the struggle that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I need this struggle. I like to dream about overcoming it, but if I eliminated it, then I couldn't dream anymore.
Then the movie's
Like,
over.
yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to kill the monster, at least not right now. So that was one of them. But if you go back to my early mid 20s, it was a sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that I hear a lot among disordered eaters. It gives me that control, right? It's like the one thing that I can control, which is ironic because you eventually lose control and you
Mm-hmm.
have less control than when you started. So it was that, and then just the cycle. I hate to use the word enjoy, but it's like I did.
No, I've
I
said that in
I
my
did.
podcast too. Like, there's
Yeah,
an enjoyment to it, and you have to be willing to let go of that enjoyment for sure.
yeah, yeah, and it's familiarity too. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this is what I know. This is my routine. Yes, I know it's kind of weird and it's damaging my health, but it's kind of fun and I like to escape and nothing else can replace it. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what my life will be like without it. There's this giant crater in your life, at least initially.
Yes.
Takes time to fill it, but you got to get dump trucks and put stuff in that crater. But I think that's a big fear for a lot of people. It's like, what do I do without it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And your brain, like, that's why people, that's not the only reason, but a big reason when people stay in abusive relationships is like they fear the unknown more than the relationship itself. Your brain likes familiarity, right? Even if the familiar piece is torturing you all the time. I describe it, bulimia, a lot as like your ex. It's like, and or kind of like this horrible person you're dating. And I
Yeah.
describe it as you need to break up with them and need to stop remembering all the good times and remember exactly like the horribleness that they are too. And then move on and, like you're saying, fill the crater, get some dump trucks, like eventually you want it to be taken up by completely different things. But yeah, it's hard. And I like that you said that a lot of people, like, it partly is control for sure, and I think it's a combination. I don't Most people, it's not like it's all. But I was talking to a client the other day, and she described when she binge eats, kind of like, well, it's my way to say no or rebel against that diet voice in my head and take my control back. And I was like, but it's both you. Like, both of those voices
Yes.
are you. Like, you have control either way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the voice, I hear that come up. It's, the voice, or, the pig, or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you, I guess it helps some people think about what's happening. And it's a cute analogy, but yeah, that voice is you. Like, those
Mm-hmm.
are your reasons. There's no alien inside your head. I don't know. Have you ever seen that movie, Inside Out? It was,
No.
I think it was a Pixar movie, and there's this little girl, and there's 5 different characters inside her head,
Oh, yes, I have
and
seen
they're
it.
all okay,
Different
and
emotions.
they're all competing for the joystick.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how it is, but I don't, in real life, I don't think that's true. I don't think you have these different entities competing for control. I think what happens is you get so used to that cycle, you get so used to the escape, is and then you start to find justifications for the behavior. Well, it's because this, it's because this, it's because this.
Mm-hmm.
What you need to
Yeah.
do is step back and take a get an aerial view and realize just how damaging this behavior is. It's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. And because that was a big question I wanted to ask you, is kind of, I have people, and myself, when I was recovering, I had to take responsibility for my actions. Like, no one was forcing me to do what I was doing. I didn't have to do it, and I actually did have control the whole time. It was just really hard not to do some of the things that I wanted to do, right? And yeah, I would agree that it's all you. And I don't necessarily love how people say, like, oh, it's the monster or something like that. I do
Yeah.
sometimes separate it in my course and on my podcast, that, like, there's a rational version of you and there's that primal version of you, and I like to put most of the eating disorder on that more primal part, just because, like, it's a habit, right? That binge eating becomes such a vicious habit cycle for me anyway. But how did you take responsibility without completely torturing yourself over that responsibility, I should say?
So if you go back to my early 30s, I mean, that's not that long ago, but and I thought, okay, what do I want, and how much longer do I want to live like this? I also realized that there was no better time to stop than today,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
I realized I was just making these excuses. I kept shifting blame to some external circumstance in my life, whether it was where I lived, maybe it was a difficult trimester in school, maybe it was a contract or a job or whatever. And those were just lies I told myself to kind of assuage the guilt a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Well, it's not that bad, which is a really dangerous thing to say, by the way. Well, it's not that bad, because
Mm-hmm.
you'll never recover with that kind of mindset. And so I realized that I was just making all of these excuses. I was justifying it. There was no reason why I couldn't stop today. There was no reason to delay or procrastinate anymore. That was taking full responsibility. Until then, I never did that. I was waiting for that perfect set of circumstances, which never came,
Mm-hmm.
in order to start that process.
Yeah. I love that you just said there is no reason. I haven't used that before in my own brain and whatnot. I love the concept of, like, it's time to start today, but I didn't really put together there is absolutely no reason why you can't not do this. There's no good reason, That's so powerful.
There's always a reason. There's just not a good one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's no good reason to not start that process,
Mm-hmm.
because recovery is not one day.
No.
You can't just snap your fingers and say, okay, everything's good now. There's no medication that will do that. There's no surgery that will do that. You could have a $20 million mansion, everything you want in life and you would still find a reason to do it. So
Yes.
so just keep that in mind. You will always find, if you're in that state of mind, you will always find a reason. It's just none of them are good.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that like the urge to binge or whatever, like it will try to find any sort of excuse and make it sound as rational as possible. And you have to get better and better at recognizing those excuses and those thoughts that sound really rational in the moment, but if you were to take a look at them, maybe a day later or a day before, you'd be like, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that? Like you would know it's not actually true. And yeah, you will like, even I love the example, even at a $21 million mansion, like you'll still be like, well, money causes too many issues, I need a binge, right?
Yeah, it
That's
has
funny.
nothing to do with your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with the amount of satisfaction you have in your life. Look at all the drug addicts in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, they have amazing homes and probably have a butler and a chauffeur and whatever. They have anything they want, and yet they still find a way to rationalize their addictions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you're waiting for some force to come into your life and change everything, you're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. You can manifest your own things. You take action is the only way that it's going to change. Now, were you ever I'm assuming that you've said mean things to yourself in your life, but uh, how did
Hmm.
you like? How was your mindset during this time? Because you talked a lot about the actions you did, but like, how were you emotionally during this time? Were you pretty hard on yourself
During which time?
during, your deepest, darkest days of your eating disorder, and then how'd you kind of make that switch in recovery?
Yeah, it definitely affects your uh, not just your body image, but your self image, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. And there's a lot of negative self talk because it's hard to be agnostic or what am I trying to say? Like indifferent towards it. Because when you look at the behavior, you don't just say, "Oh, well, that's interesting. Why did I do that?" That would be a better way to look at it. But when you are constantly repeating the same cycle, you start to think that you're damaged or something's broken. I used to think my brain was literally broken.
Yeah.
Seriously, like there was some circuitry that needed to be fixed, and I needed to be in a very safe cocoon in order to recover. That wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to think, well, maybe I'm broken. Maybe I just have to live this way. Maybe the damage is irreparable. And um, after many years of trying to overcome it, I mean, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, my state of mind was not good.
No.
Right, like this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year.
Yeah.
And it's just like this constant disappointment. And so I started to think, well, maybe I'm not capable of making these changes. Maybe this is just who I am. So I think what happens is that you start to tell yourself these stories, and then the negative self-talk affects other areas of your life. You don't perform very well, and then that just reinforces the cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't. I did not have a good state of mind. How can you have a good state of mind when
Yeah.
you're constantly damaging yourself over and over, and you make promises that you break, and you say one thing, you do the next? It's impossible.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, same thing. Thought I was just broken. I thought I was kind of worthless. I told myself horrible things, and when I did decide to change, I kind of just nipped the negative self-talk in the bud, and I was like, no matter what happens, I'm gonna love myself, and I'm gonna always have my own back because what we're doing right here is not working, and this is not a reason to be treat yourself like shit, basically. Like this is not okay, and it's also creating, like you're saying, this horrible whirlwind of damage in my life. Like it's not just in my own head, the negativity is affecting every area. So for me, I just made a clear switch of like, we are not doing this anymore. No matter what, we're going to treat ourselves with respect now, no matter what happens. So how did you make that switch? How did you stop being so hard on yourself?
Again, it wasn't one day. I know I've said that like three times. It was not one day. But if you want to correct the negative self-talk, make better decisions. And so when I stopped the cycle. I mean, not like permanently, but at least when I had fewer episodes and I started to regain control and I started to make better decisions, I started to feel better about myself. Wow.
Mm,
Wow, now I'm making healthier decisions. Now I look better. Now I can run again. Now I can do these things. So now you have a positive feedback cycle. Whereas you make those decisions, even if you don't feel like it, you get better results. You start performing better in other areas of your life. And then that encourages you to keep going. But when you're in that depth and all that momentum is against you, it's really hard to regain any momentum. But that's the
mhm.
key. You've got to turn the tide
Yeah.
somehow.
Well, it helped me to, when I was turning that tide, to kind of look at the things like you said earlier kind of objectively, and you said that'd be easy, but I literally started looking at binging and purging like I was smoking a cigarette or something. I'm like, it's not good for me, but it's not a reason to be mean to myself anymore. Like, let's just like assess the situation and see what happens. And then also to gain that momentum, like you're saying, I just try to get really excited about the small wins. Like, you know how you cheer your dog on for the stupidest stuff, like taking a poop. I would be like, good job, Jacqueline, you like made it a few hours or whatever. I would get really, really happy for those things. Is that something you did as well?
Yeah, you have to be kind of nurturing in a way.
Yes.
But I mean that's hard for me, especially because I'm a male. And two, I have a predilection towards negative self-talk.
Mm,
But it helps a lot if you can dissociate yourself from the cycle and just be yeah, like you said, objective about it. Say, okay, I did this, then I did this, then I did this. Why?
hmm.
And
Yes.
how do I get out of it? Says nothing about my character, says nothing about willpower, says nothing about who I am. I am in this place because I made a string of decisions,
Hmm.
and this is the sum of all those decisions. So then what can we do differently from
Yeah.
now on
You have
instead of
to,
berating yourself?
right, because it's not helpful. I always tell people like you didn't kick a puppy or something. Like stop attaching morality to these actions. There's nothing, especially depending on your philosophy and how you think about ethics and everything. Like there could be nothing wrong with that at all. It's just like there's
Yeah.
consequences to it, but consequences can be good or bad depending on how you look at them. So yeah, it's helpful to do that. There's something else I wanted to ask you. Okay, so we went over kind of how. Yes, here's what I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you about like some tips and tricks, which I know is so cheesy, but like tips and tricks you could share on in that moment, like when you want to binge or whatever. Like, how'd you get past that?
All it takes is a few seconds and
Hmm.
just ask
Okay.
yourself, who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? What is it that I really want? And is this in line with that?
Hmm.
And here, I'll give you another trick. What's the worst that could happen if I don't do it?
Ah, that's a sneaky one. I like that. What's the worst that's gonna
So
happen?
am I going to die? Am I going to, die of starvation? Am I just going to like commit suicide because there's no meeting? I shouldn't say that, but
Yeah, I
if
know what
there's
you
not that
mean.
drastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be the end of my life if I don't have this episode today? Yeah,
Hmm.
you might feel that void. You might feel a little empty, like, oh, I'm missing out. That's it. That's it.
Hmm.
That's the worst that could possibly happen. What's the best that could happen? I don't know. You have a good night of sleep.
Mm, yeah. Asking yourself like those questions, but also asking yourself what you're going to gain, because we're all humans. We like that immediate gratification is really powerful too. I say something a little similar where I would literally tell myself all the time, like, are you going to die? And then I would obviously answer it no. And then I would be like, this is the worst that's going to happen is you're going to feel uncomfortable, right? Like this is just going to be uncomfortable and you can survive this easily. Like you've gone through many other things. So, and your body can handle more than this. So, but that's good advice. I like that. What's the worst that can happen? I'm gonna write that down. Like all the questions. Um, okay, so covered that and everything. I don't know. What if you could talk to someone, let's imagine Kevin of the past, right? Someone who's struggling right in where you were. What would you say to them right now to get them going in the right direction?
I would say your recovery starts today. It starts with one decision, but it doesn't start when you're perfect.
Mm.
And I always had this misconception of what recovery was. I thought I would just I would be really, really bad until some arbitrary date, which didn't really mean anything. And then after that date, I would be perfect and I would never have another episode. And it's just, that's not how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
You just, okay, starting today, preferably today, I'm going to start focusing on the decisions that I make, and I'm just going to get a little bit better. So it doesn't mean I
Yeah.
won't have any more episodes from now on, but this is when the process starts. I'm planting my flag here. There's going to be ups and downs, peaks and valleys, whatever, but I'm not going to wait until I can go 100 days without an episode to start,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Accept that.
And using like, oh, you have one episode and that means it's all over, all progress is lost. Like that's also, like you're saying, it's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really powerful tool because if you look at a recovery as like, now I'm recovered. And I tell people this interesting concept of like the the day or the point that you are recovered from bulimia, you can say that you are recovered is when you choose not to binge and purge. But and I know that's so simple, that's such like a simple concept, but I say it because I want them to detach the idea of bulimia as part of their identity, and just the fact that binging and purging is the action that kind of defines bulimia, even though it's a whole bunch of other things. So like try to attach that identity of recovery right now, right here, the moment you start that process, right? Because that's the moment that you're in there. I think it's waiting for it to be perfect, like you're saying, is a really pointless and time wasting endeavor.
Yeah, don't mistake recovery for perfection. That's how I say it.
That's
And
good.
when you say, yeah, when you adopt this mentality, it gives yourself space and leeway, and it gives you room to make mistakes. So even if you have another episode, it's not like, oh, I have to go back. This isn't 12 steps where it's like 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day. That's why I don't like that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it so if you have an episode today, say, okay, well, that's what I would expect, but how can we do this better tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
What's my batting average? Was it
Yeah.
better this week? Did I make a few more good decisions? Is there some highlight? Am I doing something better that I wasn't doing a few weeks ago? Then you'll keep going. But if your definition is I have to be completely binge free or completely purge free since that arbitrary date, and if I have one screw up, then I have to
Yeah.
go all the way to the beginning. That's a really it's perfectionism, and it's also really it's another form of like defeatism.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectionism isn't something to aspire to. It's not. I mean, I would see it as less and less valuable as time goes on because I'd rather do like B plus effort and learn something, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of those slip ups, what people don't realize, a lot of my clients that are recovered now, the times where they slipped up, they've, or whatever you want to call it, I don't even, it's just like they binge and purge, whatever, they
Mhm.
learn from those things. Like those important failures are really great for recovery in a weird way. Sometimes they remind you of like what you don't enjoy about it. Sometimes they teach you something you didn't know about yourself. Like it's all, like you're saying, part of the process. And yeah, perfection is not very good. Also, I would love to ask you like what about recovery do you like the most? Like what do you like about your life now that this binge eating and bulimia is not in it?
That now I can focus on other problems in my life,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because even when you overcome this, you're going to have a lot of problems in the queue. They're they're
Yes.
just better problems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not trying to figure out a basic skill of life, which is how to feed yourself properly.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can focus on whatever, career, buying a house, making money. It's just, yeah, you're going to have problems. You're going to have headaches. It's just, these are better headaches.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. The mental clarity that I have, and I still have bad days, of course, but I'm able to handle them much better. And the mental clarity I feel compared to what kind of disaster my head was when I was bulimic, it's a lot easier to actually handle those problems and they are better problems. I would agree with that too. I didn't think about it in
It's
that way.
yeah, it's a lot easier to achieve your other goals in life if you don't have this. If you're not bulimic, it's like walking around with a ball and chain around
Yeah.
your ankle. Yeah, you can achieve those goals, but it's going to be that much harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just like you're dragging along this thing with you, like you're saying. Like I like to describe it as kind of like this annoying monster or something that you just keep bringing him along, even though you can let him loose, right? It just takes up a lot of time and energy, and it's pretty consuming. So, um, yeah. For recovery too, do you still have like fitness in your life? Do you still have, I don't know, goals with that in your life?
Yeah, I would like to do another triathlon. I haven't done
Cool.
that since my like bulimic days, ironically enough. So I'd like to get back into it. Although where I am, it's kind of hard to pursue fitness endeavors. Um,
Oh, because of the pandemic?
right. Yeah. So COVID restrictions kind of make that hard. And
Yes.
um, right now, I don't want to invest several $1,000s in fitness equipment
What? Doesn't
for
make any sense. Yeah.
several thousand. I guess I could.
No,
Um,
I'm just kidding. I think everyone
oh,
can understand that.
and I don't know how much longer I'll be in this location, so I'm just kind of in a bind right now. But yes, the short answer is I do have fitness goals, which are much easier to pursue after recovery.
Right. It's so much easier for me to like work out in the gym, have consistent energy, and actually eat enough food to gain muscle and not, I don't know, it's easier to maintain my weight now. It's much easier. It was easier for me to lose weight as well, which is something I did after I recovered, which is like, a little controversial, I guess, but I don't know. I think it's great to see someone like you who still has a healthy relationship with fitness in his life and doesn't. There's a way to have fitness in your life that isn't all consuming, right? Which is it's more enjoyable, honestly, to have
Yeah.
fitness now that you don't have bulimia and binge eating all over your shoulder. Yeah. Well, last question. Thank you for all your information and answering all these things. But where should my audience go? Where can they find you? What do you want them to know? Basically.
They can find me on YouTube, just my first and last name, Kevin Burciaga. Nothing
Hmm.
special, um, or at least not a creative name. But Instagram, the Rational Eater. So
Okay.
the underscore rational underscore eater.
All right. Yeah. And do you offer any programs that you want them to know about?
Yeah, my signature program is Empowered Eating, although the name might change here pretty soon. But you'll be working with me, a few other people,
Okay.
and I've just expanded it to 6 months. So I'm giving people lots of runway.
Cool.
You know,
Yeah, 6 months is a good. I mean, I coach people for 3 months and 6 months at a time, and I just let them choose between that. But I think that's a good amount of time. And so they get one-on-one coaching with that, and like a program to follow as well. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. I did a poll one time at when my first part of coaching, and I asked people, do you prefer, like, if you think for your recovery, which would be more helpful, just a program, an online program, no coaching, or just coaching? I wanted them to choose, and predominantly people are like, all I want is a one-on-one coach. So I think combining the two are great. So yeah, but thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing everything. I really appreciate it.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, if you like this episode, you have to come check out the Binge Breakers Recovery course. If you're trying to recover from bulimia and you're sick of doing it alone and you feel like you've tried a lot of traditional therapies and it's not working with you, come join the course. Go to bingebreakers.com/recovery-course.